Good morning, Anahi.
Good morning, Dan.
How are we doing today?
Good, good. How are you doing?
I'm tired. I just got back in from Bozeman. I've been up since like 2 a.m.
Oh God. Time for a Red Bull.
Well, you can keep the Red Bull, thank you. But yeah,
Got
I appreciate the sentiment.
it.
What are we talking about this week?
We're talking about when business becomes personal, having side hustles or small businesses, and then individual to team culture.
Welcome to the Science of Wealth, where we discuss the science behind financial planning and the art of learning and applying it. Okay, when business becomes personal, let's zoom that in a little bit. Where are we thinking about business being personal?
Yeah, so working with friends or family. That obviously sounds great in theory because you already know them, you already trust them, and it can just become comfortable having somebody you already know just right by your side navigating. Sometimes it can be the opposite and it can actually make things a lot more complicated.
Yeah, that I definitely agree with. I think there's a principle that I really, I use all the time, but I think is even more important when you're bringing family or friends into your business, as employees or partners, which is the kind distinction between how you like somebody as a person personally and how you like them and the quality of their work as a professional. So for example, you could be a great employee. I could say like, oh, you're fabulous, you're wonderful at your job. And you are, by the way, just so you know. But like maybe we just chafe, we don't jive, we just don't get along like personally, or like we just have very different views of issues or life.
Mhm.
I can still work with you, but like we're not going to hang out on the weekend, right?
Mhm.
And vice versa. Your family is probably going to have the opposite by default in terms of like you're going to like them personally because they're your family. Hopefully, you like them anyway, or your friends. Certainly, you like them because you don't have to like them. So if they're your friends, presumably you like them, but they may not be good workers or good employees or good partners. And so I think it's helpful to always separate and even sometimes clearly and explicitly state, like, well, I think as a professional, you're great. I'm not sure that I agree with you about this and this personally, or vice versa. You're a wonderful person, strong at this work thing.
Do you think it's actually possible to fully separate emotions from businesses when all of this previous history is already involved?
No, it's not. It's not possible to separate like realistically. You can rationally be like, I'm putting you in the work box or I'm putting you in the
Mm.
personal box. But I think that's something where it helps to again sometimes be explicit in communicating. So, for example, like I've worked with family members, and when I work with those family members, I'm always very careful, particularly when I'm being critical or giving negative feedback, that I say very clearly, I'm speaking, specifically of this work item, right, of this project, of this product, of this thing you've done. I don't know that I'm satisfied with this. I don't know that I'm happy with this thing. So I'm very careful to say and really specify, like, I'm talking about this report. I'm talking about this web page. I'm talking about, your analysis of this thing. Like, I don't know that I like that. So I'm not talking about you. I'm not talking about you even as a professional. I'm just talking about the work versus just being like, and I don't think this is very good. And I'm like, oh, like I built this. But if I say,
Yeah,
I'm not sure that this podcast recording was edited very well, right? Then we're just talking about the podcast. And you might be
the
the person
job itself.
responsible for it, but I didn't start this critique or this feedback by saying, I think you did a bad job. I'm just saying, I think this thing is not adequate or not good.
Yeah, I feel like it also limits a lot of like honesty, like you said. You try to sugarcoat everything, not make it sound like it's so harsh and everything. Because even like, for example, compensation, like even compensation is something hard to talk about with some of your close family and friends. And I feel like business decisions would kind of work that way, where it's like maybe it's something that somebody else really wants to do, and it's something that you are really passionate about, and you think that it's not going to work. And I feel like that would be very complicated to cross that barrier coming to the next person.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is where boundaries can be very helpful. And I'm very fond of the expression that good contracts make for good partnerships. And so that's something where I think even, hire your friend, maybe your friend like works in a business in a company, like does something professionally and they're going to like paint your house or something. I think it is very important to have a clear services agreement that is going to specify who is going to do what, for what money, at what times, with what quality, and what will signal the completion of work. Because I have seen almost universally that any time that you have like a handshake agreement, like, hey, why don't, cousin Mickey, who's good with pictures, why don't you just come and like take pictures of my party or of my wedding or something? You almost inevitably will have a difference of opinion about how that should happen, when the work should be done, when it should be delivered, etc. And so I think it helps to have those agreements beforehand, so that way you can also make the agreements or the contracts sort of responsible for any conflicts that occur. Hey, I'm just checking in with you. Contract said this was going to be done by last Friday. I'm not seeing that. Am I missing that somewhere? No, it hasn't gotten done yet. I'm sorry. Okay, well, contract said it was going to be done on Friday. Can we expect that it'll be done this, by Wednesday? Yes. Okay, great. Right. I have not come at you and said, like, you are late, you are wrong, you are bad. I've said, hey, I have an agreement. It told me to expect this. I don't see this. Am I wrong? Am I missing it? No, I'm not. Okay. So we acknowledge that it was supposed to be done. We do. Okay. Then, help me set a realistic expectation for the deliverable or for the outcome.
So, when we're talking about contracts and stuff like that, so that you're talking about creating those beforehand, having all of those agreements beforehand, what type of other healthy boundaries do you feel like is helpful in a family
I think
business?
it helps to really think hard about recourse and challenges with recourse. So, yeah, the question here being, if you can you fire this person if they're your friend or your family member based on their work or the quality of their work? And if you fired them, is it a relationship you cannot afford to lose, right? So, like, lots of people work with their spouse, and I'm very jealous of that. I think it'd be delightful to work with Caitlin all the time. At the same time, I'm aware that if like I hired Caitlin to work in our firm and then she wasn't doing her job, I would have an obligation to fire her, right? Because it's not fair to you or the other team members
Mhm.
to, have to put up with her not doing the job, right? Or not doing the work or not being an adequate team player. And she's my wife, which means even though I could literally fire her from the business, I can't fire her from my life. So that's also something where you have to
Yeah.
recognize that some business opportunities are going to be related to a relationship you can't lose or you can't afford to lose. And in that respect, you need to be really cognizant of whether you're willing to take that risk, right? Because a lot of divorce, a lot of friendships, a lot of problems do arise from business disputes, like legitimate, fair business disputes, not just like theft or malfeasance, but just like, hey, I thought you were going to do A, you thought you were going to do B. I paid you to do A, you delivered B. Now you're saying, well, I did the work, and I'm saying no, but I didn't get what I wanted. Like, it really is important to have a clear set of expectations going into it and to fairly acknowledge your availability or lack of availability for recourse when somebody does or does not do the job they're being paid for.
So out of curiosity, what do you think about when a business is being transferred to like a son or daughter? Like it's kind of being inherited to a son or daughter. How do you think that changes the structure
I
within the
think
business itself?
inheriting a business or just like handing the business over to the son or daughter can be incredible or it can be absolutely devastating. And it really depends on how that entry is framed. So let's just look at two short examples. Scenario one, you are the owner of a company, you're getting ready to retire, you've got a son or daughter that you'd like to be in the business. They've never worked in the business, but they said, like, yeah, mom, dad, I'll take over the business. And you're like, great. And so you hand them the keys and you tell them to just, send you 50% of the profits every year, as your sort of like annuity for handing it over to them. And you kind of walk away. You have probably just alienated or pissed off every person who's worked at your company previous to this exchange because they've been there. They've been adding to the equity, they've been adding to the value, they have experience, they have perspective. And then suddenly, Jane or whoever is coming in the door who has no experience in the business just shows up one day and is like, I'm in charge now. They are not going to have the respect and admiration of that team. And you may have inadvertently offended or outright alienated the loyalty and respect of your employees because instead of elevating them or giving them an opportunity to buy in or become partners or managers or owners, you've told them, hey, thanks for all your hard work, but my son is the most qualified person for this because he's my son. So scenario one, not a great outcome. Scenario two, your child, your family member, whoever it is, works in the business, right? Joins as an entry level employee, gets paid as an entry level employee, is evaluated as an entry level employee, and then promotes and elevates and grows in the firm the way that anybody else would. And then someday they get the same rights to buy in and become a partner or something like that as you might offer to anybody else in the firm. And there's a tacit acknowledgement here that there's still a bit of a problem in the future, which is if they're like your only child, then one day they might inherit all your shares and go from like a 3% shareholder to a 90% shareholder. That's a future problem, and you can use trusts and different structures to try to solve that. But fundamentally, it's a very different framing because this person has earned their place at the table, not just gotten a seat at the table because you're their parent.
Yeah, I feel like that'd be very interesting to be part of a firm or part of a business where you've been working your whole time and then new boss comes in and it's just their daughter or son and they might not have all that experience that you would gain throughout the years and it's just somebody else's new. So I feel like that could really change the demand dynamic of everything, not just within the team, but like the business itself. Person
Well,
who was
and both
taking.
the scenarios just outlined, there was also like a good faith expectation here that like the son or daughter is a competent, capable person. It's just a problem of how they entered the business. God forbid your kids are not that bright or not that hardworking or are greedy or selfish or foolish. And so it's just part of it as well. Is like, look,
Yeah.
just because they're your family and just because you want good things for them does not mean that it's a good idea to just hand them the keys to the kingdom just because. And I think that's where you've got good like drama
Yeah.
versions of this, like the show Succession is essentially all about these three incompetent children of like this mega mogul, right? All vying for control of the empire, but like they're all incompetent.
Mhm.
So you just spend the whole series cycling around like, well, maybe he's gonna get it. Nope, he's an idiot. Never mind. Like over and over again, and that's like the drama and the tension. But there's also real world cases, right? Like this is not a political statement. It's just a statement of competence. But like I do not know why Donald Trump's children are in the White House. Like they have no political experience, no international relations experience. They don't know shit. Pardon my French. So like I don't know why they're in the White House, but they are because
They're
Donald
there.
Trump is a big person for nepotism, and that again I don't even say that politically. Like I say
Yeah.
that in the same sense that like Joe Biden didn't have his kids in the White House. Obama didn't have his kids in the White House. Bush didn't have his kids in the White House. Clinton didn't have his kids in the White House. But our current president has just decided that his children must be the best people at something for some reason.
But it's just enabling them and then it's stopping. It's like creating a barrier for other people who work their way up and
Well, and
somehow
here's
the
the
kids are
pros and
just there.
cons, right? If you want to be really, really blunt about it, the pros of giving your children opportunities over other people in your organization is that you get to work with your kids. The cons is that you will probably alienate the hardest working, best people on your team because they will see you favoring your family over competence or merit or capability, and they will want to leave or they will register their discontent, some other way.
Well, in light of talking about businesses, I also wanted to talk about having side hustles and small businesses, just doing something outside of your regular day to day things that you do. So it's very common now to hear about people having side hustles, possibly monetizing their hobbies in some way. For some people, it's not only about the money, I would say. It's more about having something to do outside of their work hours and having the ability to distress themselves in a way that can also get them the money. So just curious to know, like, at what point does it stop being just a side hustle and then it just becomes you start treating it like a real business,
I
financially
mean,
speaking.
there's a technical answer here, and the technical answer is essentially the second you start exchanging money for goods or services. Like there's lots of handshake stuff people do, right?
Okay.
Like you just hire your friend to watch your house while you're on vacation and take care of your pets, and you Venmo them a couple $100, and nobody says anything and reports it to the IRS or anything
Mm-hmm.
like that. Like there's just a difference there where we all
Mm-hmm.
tacitly engage in these de minimis businesses where it's not like a business. You're not going to file an entity. You're not going to file a tax return. You're not going to report the income, and we just sort of accept that that happens. Doesn't mean it's legal, by the way, but that's just definitely what like everybody does on some level. When you get into like the
Yeah.
hobby thing, there's a difference between saying like I want to get into woodworking or I want to get into glass work or I want to get into metalworking or whatever it is, and doing that and spending your money on it, and that's just a hobby and that's an interest, and getting to the point where you are selling what you create or charging money for what you do. If your hobby or interest is an activity or a skill, like let's say dancing or singing or playing music, instead of creating a tangible object. I think it is something where I think there's a really, really nasty donut hole problem, which is like your hobby is fun because it's fun. And then the first dollar part of it being a business where you go from like just doing it for fun to selling, $50 worth of stuff to somebody that you like crafted or made, I think that $50 moment is the worst return on investment humanly possible. And then the more you do it, the better it gets. So
Mhm.
like if you have a hobby and you're like, oh, I want to make $100, $500, $1,000 a year on my hobby, I don't think you're going to make a return on that investment because you're going to have to spend so much time, money, and effort in the compliance stuff. Or you're going to do what a lot of people do, which is you're going to commit tax evasion by just ignoring it and pretending it's not real, which, spoilers, the IRS is not a fan of. There's a baseline here where, like, when your first couple bucks, your first couple $100 of a hobby turned business suck because you'll just spend all of that money back on like running the business, doing bookkeeping, paying extra tax
Mhm.
filing stuff, getting a sales tax license, staying compliant with your reporting. Like you might literally make money in like a money in money out sort of way, but like your time value, you're going to get paid less than minimum wage. It's going to be terrible. But then if you get that business to 3,000, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, well, now it's different. Now it's actually big, like a genuine business that can potentially self support. And that's a very different equation. So, all this to come back to your core question, like, when should you treat a side hustle like a real business financially? You should avoid it like the plague until you can't like resist it anymore. And then you should be sprinting to try to make it more viable than minimally viable.
So if somebody has like a just like a small business, just like a hypothetical, possibly like doing choreography, asking for a friend again, Um, so the second they start doing the choreography and getting money out of
Yeah,
that,
I mean,
while
you are
reporting
being
that.
paid for a service that is income. So legally speaking, that is income you need
Mm,
to report. There are some really de minimis exemptions from reporting income out there, but like really, the second you're getting
mhm.
paid anything meaningful, technically it's income. Technically, you should report it. Technically, you should file a Schedule C or incorporate and file a corporate return if you're doing it that structure. You should pay self-employment taxes and payroll taxes and like all of it. So again, that's where I come around to like doing something for like $20 a year is
What?
absolutely not worth it. Doing something for a couple $1,000 a year
Mhm.
is worth it. But like there's just this donut hole between not getting paid and it being better than getting paid a little bit and having to do all the work around it. Or you do what a lot of people do again, and I'm not saying you should do this or that anybody should do this, but you do what a lot of people do is you just commit tax
Mhm.
evasion and you pretend it didn't happen, which again is a crime. So I'm emphasizing that because it's not a it might work out short term, but it's not a great long term plan.
So what are some like good financial habits that you should start taking or start doing as you start your small business per se? What do you think would help keep track of everything so that you're not
So I
committing
think
tax evasion?
first and foremost, if you already have a day job that's supporting you, like your hobby turned side hustle is still in the side hustle category and not like you're not trying to make a living at it. I think one of the best things you can do is to not actually enjoy the income from it. And that sounds weird or bad, but it's like, look, if you're making, let's say, $1,000 a year, you're sort of better off just making the $1,000, reporting the income, paying the taxes, doing the appropriate like bookkeeping, and filing the appropriate tax return, and that'll suck a couple $100 out of your $1,000. But that then means you will have the net proceeds and know that it's good and compliant. You're not going to get in trouble for it. And then if you want to grow that business, if you want to do more choreography, or you want to do more woodworking, or you want to sell more, whatever it is, then you have money to reinvest back into it, and you can then hopefully potentially do more of it. So you want to do things like track your transactions. You want to do bookkeeping. You can do it on something like a spreadsheet, but it will not be very good. I also emphasize that most people have no idea how to do bookkeeping. So there's also the balance here of like you want to get software for it sooner than later if you're going to really actually take it seriously. And if you don't know what you're doing, you should take a class. And even if you take a class, you might want to outsource it because you still may not know what you're doing. Just because you took a class does not mean you're any good at it. But that's just sort of the thing is like, look, treat treat a business making $1,000 a year the same way you treat a business making $1 million a year. Keep good records, keep receipts, pay your taxes appropriately, and document and file things appropriately, and be fiscally conservative with your side hustle business, and you use the money to help grow it or help maintain it. And then, if you quit one day, you can just take what's left out of it and know that it's free and clear and good. And if it grows bigger and better, then you'll have capital reinvest in it. And then eventually, maybe your side hustle becomes your full time hustle.
I see a lot of people on social media turning their hobbies into something that they do as their 9 to 5s, just like completely taking the switch from the regular job and then just making that switch into something. Do you think that has to do a lot with them wanting the freedom, wanting more financial freedom, being their own boss?
I
What is
mean,
your take there?
yes. I want to be careful here because there's a genre of people doing that are just committing tax fraud, and that's what their business is. So, like, when you see videos of people being like,
Yeah.
"I bought this 3-piece suit and I had it monogrammed with the name, like with the initials of my business, and now it's a business expense." Like, nope, that's just tax fraud. So you want to be careful with that. But assuming that you're actually doing it like on the up and up, and you just like really have a passion for whatever your service or your business is, and you want to grow it that way, I mean, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with growing it or doing it that way. I think the big thing here is, again, the law on what you have to pay in taxes and how you do things compliantly does not treat you any differently if you're doing it for $500 a year versus if you're doing it for $500,000 a year. So it's just meaningful to sort of recognize, like, a hobby can just be a hobby. You don't, like, the world loves to tell us, particularly social
Yeah.
media loves to tell us, like, just you should just monetize all your interests. But it's like, man, it's okay to just play video games and
Yeah.
not stream on Twitch. It's okay to dance and just enjoy dancing without
Yeah.
charging people for dance classes. It's
Mhm.
okay to love woodworking and give pieces you make away as gifts and not try to like run the table at the farmer's market.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's very, very, that's talked a lot about in social media, where it's like find something that you love and make money out of it. And I feel like that's a lot of people are already following that. I feel like, I don't know if it's my TikTok, I don't know what's happening, but it's like I see a lot of people like finding the not the dumbest things, but like finding the easiest things out there, and they can make like a big business out of it. And like, for example, just like making like taking small pictures and then publishing them, making all of that money in.
And
Why
this
I
is
bring
just a
this up?
brief explanation of a more complicated topic, but there's a Japanese concept called ikigai, which is you should do that which you are good at, that which you love, that which the world needs, and that which you can get paid for. Now, does the world need tiny
Mhm.
photos? I have no idea, right? Or like, does the world need people like eating 17 hamburgers on TV or like on TikTok, like as a stream? I don't think
No.
so, but those things get a million views. So what do I know? Like, there can be a
Yeah.
bit of like judgmentalism that comes with this. I think it's important just to take a step back and say, like, look, it's not up to you or me or anybody else to judge the validity of a business or the validity of a hobby or an
Mhm.
interest. Like, I'm not a train person. I don't understand train people,
Yeah.
but there are people who love trains, and you know what? Good for them. That's it.
It works for people. It works. Certain things work for different
Absolutely.
people, so works for everybody. Hmm. So the next topic I wanted to talk about was kind of the switch between being an individual business owner and then going forward to creating a team. So I think it's a very interesting part of working in an organization anywhere. I've been in many different jobs. So it's been interesting to see how all the different backgrounds and values and perspectives come into the same environment. Every company itself has its own culture and expectations and way of operating. And so each person will come in with their own priorities and identity outside of work. So I think when it's a smaller company, it's easier to know when how personalities clash or how personalities get along with each other, or how individual habits can affect the things around on a day-to-day basis. So how does culture naturally change as the company grows, when it goes from one person to a two, three, four, five, six, and it keeps
I think
growing?
it's important to
Hopefully.
define culture here. And I think there's sort of two facets of culture. One part of culture is just like what is tacitly known as the right thing to do, right? There's sort of this universal term like do the right thing. Okay, well, in different companies, doing the right thing can be very different. Like if you're in a go, 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 macho, alpha male sales company, the right thing to do is pick up the phone and start calling people and get some sales done, right? And if you're in a thoughtful, contemplative, we think before we act sort of company, consulting with your colleagues, working through the problems, collaborating before you take action could be the right thing. So there's culture that is defined by values and in
Mhm.
the day-to-day actions that anybody in the company would take given a lack of supervision or a lack of input. And then there's culture just sort of in the personality. Like I love to make fun of myself here. Like I am a chronically unfun person. That doesn't mean that I don't like fun. Like I have fun, but like I'm not a fun person. I don't like bring laughter and joy to the world. That's just not my skill. And so like in a yeah, I mean, like, don't get me wrong.
But
Like
in the
I
office?
like you and Daniel are yucking it up and laughing over there all the time, and I'm just in my and like, and I'm in my corner
You're
just quietly
yappers.
clacking away, and like I don't care if you guys are having a good time, but I say all that to then say like there's also just the culture that I would even just sort of use the word like vibes for. Like is it a warm vibe? Is it a cold vibe?
Mhm.
Is it a ruthless, cutthroat vibe? Like there's that piece to it. So when you ask the question, how does culture change naturally as a company grows? I look at that and I say there's the culture that the founder wants, and then they are responsible for cultivating it. They don't have to be responsible for it. So it doesn't mean that like the leader or the founder or the original employees have to like run around with like the streamers and the banners making everybody happy or like whatever the objective is. But I think they have much more
Yeah.
responsibility for the first type of culture, which is that like values what is right. And then I think the team members bring the second part of the culture, which is they contribute their unique personal selves to the
Mhm.
organization. And as long as their unique personal self has healthy overlap with the organization, then that works well. You could also then run into culture clashes where somebody is a great, wonderful person, but like they are just way, 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 way different than the natural culture of the rest of the team. And that gets awkward. That
Yeah.
creates conflicts. And so, there can be people who are culture fit. They just, they align perfectly to the organization. They don't add to it. They just make it more of what it already is. There are people who are culture ads, right? People who enliven the culture, bring their unique selves, make it more interesting, make it more fun. Like I look at you and Daniel and Steph all as being great people in that sense. You all are culture ads more than you are culture fits. Like none of you are like me that much, and so that makes you all culture. No. And
Like,
then
we're on
there can be culture detractors, and those people don't tend to stick around long because they're not a good fit.
So do you think the challenges with, per se, like, keeping the culture comes with as people are coming in, or do you think it's maintaining that same quote unquote culture
I think it
throughout the
has to
years?
evolve. I think the trick here is whether you, and again, it comes
Mm,
back to this cultivation question. Do you let the leadership continuously cultivate and kind of guide the culture? And that's it's sort of like running a garden. Like you don't plant a
mhm.
seed and then just like let the plant run wild. Like you prune it, you trim it back, you tie up a vine so it grows in the right direction, etc.
Yeah.
So that can mean in practical terms, do you enable certain things on the team? Do you prohibit certain things on the team? Do you hire people with an eye towards the company's values and culture in mind, or do you not select people
Mhm.
because you don't think they're going to add the right type of culture? Like I'll give an example. There was a company probably this probably goes back 5 or 6 years, but there was a company, I want to say it was called Campsite. It was like a software platform for virtual teams, and they had this sort of correction moment. And it was a big controversy. So I'm not giving this example to say like I feel strongly one way or the other. It's just a good case study. But I think they had gone the direction of letting their people drive the culture for a long time. And the culture started to turn into something that the leadership and the founders did not like or want. Like the company was not behaving or being like the company they wanted it to be. And so they waited too long and they tried to course correct. They just suddenly kind of came out and said like you shall not talk about these subjects anymore. Like we were just banning these topics. And the whole team sort of revolted because the team had built its own culture in the absence of guidance
Mhm.
and cultivation. And so suddenly the owners came in and said, your culture is going to be something
Mhm.
completely different now. And it doesn't work. But if the leaders and the owners had been present the whole time and had been, carefully assisting in the development of culture, they probably could have avoided the problem on both sides.
Yeah, I in my previous job, we worked fully online, fully remote, everybody on their own thing, and it was kind of a switch coming here while we are in person and working on everything together. But in my previous jobs, we were given a task, you work on that task, and then that's it. That's about it. You report back to your manager, and that's your day. Uh, but I was given the task to like try to find a way to find or create culture when we're not together. So I think it was very interesting and cool to see like the transition over here where in my previous job everybody still had their own identity, everyone still had their own values and things that they care about and everything, but nobody else knows about it. So coming into here where everybody is working on everything together, everybody is involved, everybody is all personalities show out here. I think it's very cool to see the change there between place to place. um, and then with that, with the efficiency topic that you were talking about with the case study, um, how should businesses balance that efficiency factor, but also maintaining that fun environment or keeping those relationships with other employees, your
I think it's really
coworkers around in the
important
office?
to keep the outcome in mind. And that's going to sound like it only goes one way, but bear
Mhm.
with me for a second. When I say the outcome in mind, what I mean is the organization should accomplish its mission. So like a business should be profitable, providing its goods or services to the public and its clients and customers as it was built for. And the team should be happy and feel like they are doing well in that environment, which then comes around to that maintaining relationships, that individual culture, those individual values. And also that means, prioritizing appropriately. So it's sort of a everything in moderation, including moderation. Like you could say, we are this type of organization, full stop. And because of that, we will only do this. Well, at some point, that's just too much. Like if you leave no room for any individuality, no room for individual culture, no room for anybody to bring themselves to work, they just have to be robots. You will never build, a fully functioning organization because nobody will feel happy or at home there. And in turn, if you just let everybody
Yeah.
run around doing what they want to do, and you place empathy ahead of everything else, right? A deep care for other people's feelings or beliefs or values, you will spend a lot of time making each other feel good and nothing will get done. And so you do have to look at it and say, look, there's what is necessary and there's what we can enjoy when the necessary is addressed. And you try to get to the necessary with enough margin for error, and then you try to leave as much room for the rest of it as possible around that.
So when individuals come in and bring in their own identity and culture, everybody should be focused on still having that same goal in mind, having the same organizational mission, still working for something, but still also finding a way to bring in their own values and like background in general. How do you see that happening? Like how what would you suggest individuals do bring into a company while like fitting in with everyone and completing the job and doing what you have to do, but also bringing in their own?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you have to start by joining an organization you have at least some alignment with. Like if you are just a polar opposite, you are not gonna. It's not just not gonna work. Like oil and water, fire and ice. Like we're just these are not compatible things. So you have to have some overlap in the first place.
Yeah.
There's an extreme answer to this, which is like the army version. The army has this expression, which is you the army didn't join you, you joined the army. So the army supersedes everything. And then when the army's needs are met, then you get to be yourself. But like that's very much on the edges and the fringes. I think in realistic and practical terms, then you want to look at, hey, can I do what this organization needs me to do and be myself enough adequately? And that's something where you want to lead with curiosity. You want to lead with a desire to understand and share rather than a certainty that what you're bringing to the table should be accepted. And so this is something where, like, I, for example, am not terribly fond of aggressively political people. And I say that having poked at the president's family not that long ago, but I didn't do that politically. I did that for nepotism reasons. But like, I am not big on people being very political at work, not because it doesn't matter, not because it's not important, not because people shouldn't have strong feelings about it, but because I think people feel too strongly about certain issues and tend to lose their ability to empathize and be curious with others. And there are some issues that I'm willing to accept that on, right? Like if somebody came in and said, like, I really just believe that the Nazis are misunderstood. I don't care about your view of this. I do not need your culture or your values here. Thank you. Goodbye. Right. But if
Bye.
somebody comes in and says, like, hey, this holiday or this event is very important to my family, And I know the team is doing something on that day, but like I would like to spend that time with my family. It's important to me. I think that's a reasonable balance, right? I think it's reasonable to say, hey, hey, in my culture we give gifts, and so I'm going to be a gift giver, and I want to over time build a culture of gift sharing here because it's meaningful to me, it's meaningful to my culture, and I think that's additive. I think it doesn't hurt us to be more generous with each other. So again, I think you want to view any
Yeah.
cultural things you're bringing to the organization as complementary, and if not complementary, as additive. And then just to be mindful that not
Mhm.
all values are going to be compatible with all organizations or all teams or all people. And it's just something where you can
Yeah.
mean well by it and still do harm even when being well meaning.
Mhm.
So it's important to really reflect on, is this for the good of this group? Right? Am I bringing this part of my values, my
Mhm.
personality to this because I think it would be good for us? Or am I doing it because I want it
Mhm.
and it's about me? And that's where again I think
Yeah.
curiosity and a
Yeah,
desire to
yeah.
share and grow is the more important leading concept.
Yeah, I think most importantly, like you said, it's you're joining the firm. The place is not joining you. So you also have to take into consideration what things you can add to the place that you're joining. And that comes with like realizing things that you're good at and keeping a list of like your strengths and things that you could add as opposed to like completely changing everything and starting from scratch and taking away
Yeah,
everything that
and I
was
mean, like again,
previously
you
there.
you just it's not that you shouldn't take away from things or reduce things, right? Again, cultures are malleable. Some things that are important today will not be important tomorrow, but I think it helps
Mhm.
to view what you're bringing as additive as opposed to replacing. And that's just something where
Mhm.
again you look at it and you do well with it, and you try to approach it in a well-meaning way as opposed to a like I just want it this way, right? It's like here's my approach to that. I started the
Yeah.
firm, or I started the firm that we work in. Like I got to set the default. My default setting now when you or Steph or Daniel bring something up is to try to err to the side of yes by default. So like when Steph says, "Hey, we should do like a Friday fun day." Right? Like again, I'm not particularly fun, but I don't hate fun. I don't dislike fun, right? So
Ooh.
my answer is yes. Like listen, like I was never going to come up with that.
Yeah.
That's not like in my
Mhm.
DNA or my character to be like let's go do something fun because I just like the work. That's just me. But I'm just going to say yes because it doesn't hurt anybody for me to say yes. It doesn't hurt anybody for me to just give you or Steph or Daniel or any other team member permission to bring something to the team. But if the proposal was like, "Hey Dan, we think we should just work 2 days a week." Okay. That's not a culture ad. That's just I don't want to work.
Yeah, I think all of the new things that I'm starting to see between the switches of the previous jobs that I had, it's cool to see the culture, but ultimately at the end of the day, and it's sharing that same end goal. And at the end of the day, you just want to keep the business successful and also enjoy your time while doing
And
that. So,
I
yeah,
think again, values
very
can
good
feed
points.
back into all this. Like I'll give an example from this retreat that Steph and I were just on. The organization hosting it shared their company values, and one of their values is be well by being you,
Mhm.
and one of their other values is mission driven.
Oh, okay.
And so they explicitly brought this up. They said be well by being you is the most weaponized value because people on the team will come in sometimes and be like, I want to take like 3 months off and do something awesome. And they're like, well, sure, like that definitely is being well by being you, but how does that complement our mission, our other value of being mission driven?
Taking
Taking
accountability what's
accountability,
around you.
right? And they do the same thing. They offer a sabbatical benefit every 5 years where team members get to take a couple weeks off and they get like a bonus to fund them doing something fun. And what they do with that then is they say like, hey, before you go, you have to figure out how your stuff will run in your absence. That is your responsibility. But then when you go, you get to go. Like you get to delete your email, shut
Yeah.
off your Slack channel, ignore all calls, etc. Like you really get to be gone. But you have to take responsibility for it first.
Cool.
So you have to be mission driven. And once your mission is adequately
Yeah.
supported, then you get to do well, but do well by being you or be well by being you. So that's how they use two complementary values to build a culture where everybody is very accountable, but also they emphasize what is good for the individual as well as the team.
Yeah. Taking care of yourself while also taking care of everything that's around you and making sure that nothing is left behind or it's going to mess with somebody else's schedule or somebody else's workload. Still taking
Absolutely.
care of yourself.
So now I know I've been
Mhm.
gone essentially all week here, so I think you've got really fertile ground to answer this. What have you learned about in the past week or two since you've last been on the podcast?
Yeah, so this week I learned a little bit more about different types of equity compensation and how some company use them as employee compensation on top of salaries and bonuses, which is what's more familiar to most of the people. So, for example, RSUs or company shares employees receive over time through vesting schedules. So, meaning that employees are incentivized to do work that meaningfully improves the value of the company and staying longer with the company. And then on the complete opposite end, I also learned a little bit about phantom stocks, which gives employees the benefit from the company's growth without actually giving them the ownership share. So it was interesting to see both ends from people who will receive them and then other people who will receive them
Hmm.
as well, but not
And they
the
can both
actual
be really
ownership.
meaningful compensation. Like it's not that one is intrinsically better than the other, but because you might be in a situation where maybe one company would give
Mhm.
you like 0.001% of real equity, or another company would pay you like 5% of the company's profits but not give you equity. Like they're not intrinsically better or worse, but they are different.
Yeah.
I really like Philip
Yeah. Yeah.
Paloviev has a
Hmm.
quote on this, which is if you pay people in synthetic equity, they will give you synthetic loyalty. So I think it's a meaningful thing to think beyond just the financial numerical value of the things, and also to really think hard about what they represent in practice.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yep.
The Science of Wealth is produced by My Wealth Planners, a registered investment advisor in Colorado. The theme song is This Is Your Time by Dan Phillips. The podcast is intended for educational purposes only and is not investment advice or any other form of advice. Not all material discussed on the podcast is appropriate for every individual in every circumstance, so you should consult with a certified financial planner, tax professional, or legal professional as appropriate before attempting to apply any of the subjects, strategies, or tactics discussed on the podcast.